Every 3 people suffer from some form of allergy. That's why we created Allergy Insider, the go-to resource for all things allergy. From common causes to symptoms and testing options, we have you covered. Visit allergyinsider.com.
Good evening. Welcome to all our viewers today, and welcome to our discussion on spring allergies. My name is Kim. I'll be your host this evening. I am joined by Dr. Thulja Trikamjee. She is a specialist allergologist and paediatrician. She is currently consulting at the University of Cape Town Lung Institute and will be answering some questions online. How you engage with us is in the live chat. We'll hopefully get through as many as possible and some of the questions that have already been posted in the post from earlier this week. Welcome, Dr. Thulja.
Thank you for having me, Kim, and thank you to Allergy Insider for hosting us.
Great.
So before we kick off with the live, I thought I would just give our viewers, and thank you everyone for joining us, just a little bit of a intro on spring allergies and give you a bit of a taste of what we should be worrying about and why. So as you know, spring allergies and allergies in general is something that's extremely prevalent. But did you know that it's actually considered as one of the oldest diseases ever? I'm going to quote an author from the 1800s who had written this in actually an English literature text. He said, and I quote, "About the beginning or middle of June in every year, a sensation of heat and fullness is experienced in the eyes. To this succeeds irritation of the nose, producing sneezing. To the sneezings are added a further sensation of tightness of the chest and a difficulty of breathing." I know that there are many viewers right now who can identify with these exact symptoms in 2024. What's important here is that we have been dealing with this condition for an extremely long time. But what has changed? What has changed is our environment and our exposures. So in terms of how allergies and how spring affects us, I always like to use this image, and I'm sure many people are confused right now, because I find that patients with allergic rhinitis often get told that their symptoms are mild and that allergic rhinitis doesn't often get the importance or the real crux of what it causes in patients. So this is the male proboscis monkey. It's a monkey that actually was facing extinction. And what scientists found was that it was the monkey's nose that actually is preventing the monkey from going into extinction. This is because if you look at the size of the nose, it creates an echo chamber, and that echo chamber is what helps the male monkey call out to females, or females call out to males so that they can attract the opposite sex. And actually, it's the nose or your nostrils and your respiratory instrument that is going to prevent this species from going extinct. Now, like I said, allergic rhinitis is extremely common, but some texts have actually highlighted and said it's probably one of the most common chronic conditions in the world. Texts highlight that allergic rhinitis affects between 10 and 40% of patients. But I can tell you as an allergologist that every day I come across patients who have all of the symptoms that I described: runny nose, itching, difficulty breathing, irritation when they're exercising, or hectic influences on their quality of life during the change of season who are undiagnosed. So the reality actually is that while medical texts say that our prevalence is between 10 to 40%, this is a gross underestimation. And I think there's more than 50% of people on earth, probably today, who are living with allergic rhinitis. These are statistics from our South African report. It says that more than 20% of our population now suffers from allergic disease. Again, these are statistics that are confirmed based on patients who are tested. I would say that most patients walking around with allergic symptoms are probably not tested and are not picked up. So this means that the number is, again, underestimated. Of the estimated 4 million South Africans with asthma, 1.5% die of this condition annually. Now, this is important because this goes back to me showing you how important the nose is and how important breathing with your nose is, and how this is not just a simple disease where you've just got congestion or blockage of your nose. Asthma, as you know, is one of the commonest causes of mortality in the world, and it's in the World Health Organization Millennium Development Goals to actually decrease asthma mortality. So if we're looking at airway congestion, and that is now your asthma, which very, very often is related to upper airway disease, which is your allergic rhinitis, it means that it's actually a serious issue. It's not something that just impacts your quality of health. This is something that has a major influence on patients, but it also has a major impact on society and mortality in third world countries. South Africa, again, has the fourth highest asthma death rate, and that goes to the facts that I just mentioned to you just now. Now, I'm not sure if many of you know, but at the UCT Lung Institute, some of the colleagues who I work with have actually started a groundbreaking pollen monitoring campaign, meaning that in South Africa, we're actually now able to monitor pollen, meaning that you as the patient or you as a South African citizen are able to go onto a website, onto our Real Pollen Count website, and see on any given week how high the pollen counts are. This is an example from about 2 weeks ago, but it really gives you an idea of how your pollen counts can rise and decrease. And it's really fairly simple. We generally just color code it. Green means that you generally, if you're allergic to pollen, shouldn't have too bad a problem. As you're moving away from green to your yellow and your orange, it means that our pollen counts are rising, but you're still potentially okay. But once we hit the red zones, and it's coming, guys, because it's now September, that means that patients who are sensitized to pollen are really going to start struggling. And this is something that you can monitor from any part of the country that you're in. Now, how do we diagnose allergic rhinitis? Because I know that many patients suffer from these symptoms, but often they say, well, where do I go? What do I do? How do I know if I have the allergy? How do I know that this is the thing that is causing my symptoms? Often I say to patients that a good history is good enough. I see a lot of patients who get lots of testing done, and I'm speaking to, and I hope there are many of you who identify, I'm sure there are many of you who identify with this, with those of you who get milk tests done again and again, and get many food allergy tests done, believing that potentially the wheat or the milk or the sugar or the salt might be causing issues in your nose. Most of the time, just by taking a good history, that means knowing if your symptoms are worse in winter or summer, if your symptoms are worse when you're near your dog or your cat, if your symptoms are worse in the day or the night, these are clues as to what might potentially be something that's aggravating you and irritating your nose, your eyes, your skin, and your chest. And then, of course, the examination. And these are things that we look at with examination. Of course, these are severe patients, but I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting in a coffee shop or I'm standing in the queue at the supermarket waiting to pay for my groceries, and I can identify in a queue of maybe 25 people, at least 5 people, literally just by eyeballing them, you have allergic rhinitis and you have allergic rhinitis, because I can see the rubbing of the eyes, the rubbing of the nose, and these are the signs we look for. You usually will see a bit of inflammation around your eyes, and it's the picture on the far left. We refer to that as allergic shyness. A lot of people tend to do this with their hands. We refer to this as the allergic salute. Generally, it's more common in children. And something like this, which we call the side salute. And what that would do, if you look at the first image, is cause a bit of a crease on your nose. Because if you spend your entire life, particularly in the period when your bone cartilage is growing when you're a kid, doing this again and again and again, constantly rubbing your nose at night, you're going to find that there's going to be a type of a crease. And I often see patients, and I hope a lot of you are not going to go stare at yourselves in the mirror now, because this is what a lot of my patients do. The second time they come to see me for consultation, they say, we were trying to look at what you were describing, right? It comes with years of practice, but sometimes you can actually see a dent on your nose. So for all those people who are also concerned about how they look, allergic rhinitis can impact your appearance of your face as well. Another common thing we see is dryness of your lips, because a lot of patients tend to every single night, and Kim and I had a few minutes to chat before we started this live, and we were talking about the symptoms and how patients might present. And I was saying most patients who breathe with their mouths actually don't realize that this is a problem. I see patients every day when I'm examining them or I take a history from them, and I say to them, when you sleep at night, you're keeping your mouth open and you're breathing with your mouth. And often they'll say, but I've always done that. And once you actually manage allergic rhinitis better, I often have people coming back and saying, wow, I actually thought that breathing with my mouth was normal. I never knew what it was like to actually breathe with my nose. So another big sign, waking up with dry mouth, dry lips, having cracking on your lips, even though you're using your Vaseline or you're using your moisturizers on your lips all the time. And this is just a very nice graphic to show you, particularly with children, because often a lot of the symptoms that I mentioned to you are easier to ascertain with an adult, but asking a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old if they have these symptoms, if they're waking up at night, if they are mouth breathing is difficult. And often you'd find with your kid that these are some of the symptoms, your constant stuffiness, red nose, getting sick all the time, and many of the other things that I mentioned. What's of particular interest to me, and we'll chat about that just now, and I hope some of you have questions on that, is the part where I showed you trouble with focus. Because for me, allergic rhinitis is such an underrated disease. Most people just look at it as a blocked nose. But did you know that there is research in first world countries, and this has been proven statistically with hundreds and thousands of children, that if you are breathing with your mouth or if you're breathing with a blocked nose every day of your life, the part that it impacts your sport and your physical activity is obvious, because you're going to get more tired and you're not going to be able to breathe. But if you're not sleeping well because you're breathing like this, your sleep is affected, your concentration is affected, and your performance in school is definitely affected as well. So trouble with focus is another big one, which people often underestimate and don't attribute to allergic rhinitis. And just quickly, because I think we're going to chat about this more in the live, but some of the management principles, right? I don't like to go through guidelines, but big things, allergy avoidance. How possible is allergy avoidance really? Because if you're allergic to dust mite, which is a very common one, you may as well live in a bubble. You cannot avoid dust mite. Everywhere you go, in fact, Kim and I are doing this live right now in a room with carpets. We're breathing in dust mite throughout the hour. So these are things that you are exposed to all the time. And often patients want to do a test because they want to know, what should I avoid? But avoidance isn't always possible. And I think that's the message there. And the last bit is, I think, really your bit as patients and the viewers to start asking questions about how you feel allergic rhinitis impacts you. Do you think that you need testing? What types of tests you'd like to do, and anything that you want to know about spring and allergies at this time. And I think I'm going to let Kim take over now.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Thulja, for that amazing introduction to spring allergies. It really gets us thinking as to what's normal, what are we just letting ourselves live with, and what can we change. So let's dive into some of our Facebook Insider questions. We have one here from Deline. So Deline, if you're out there, this is for you. What can I do at home to avoid spring allergies?
Okay. So actually, Deline, one of the reasons I put out the slide to show patients that, some of our allergen levels are in the green zone and some are in the yellow zone and some are in the orange zone, is because really with spring, firstly, you might be allergic to one pollen, you might be allergic to 10 pollens, you might be allergic to all of the pollens. So that kind of is key. You might be allergic to grass only, or you might be allergic to grasses, trees, weeds. You might be allergic to a tree that you've never seen in your entire life and is not even a tree that is indigenous to South Africa. Or you might be allergic to a tree that's in your backyard or next to your bedroom window and you're inhaling it all the time. So I think it's really key to understand that when it comes to spring, what triggers you and what causes your symptoms, Kim, in this is really, really important. I often tell patients they don't need to go out and do all of the tests to find out if they're allergic to every pollen, but knowing when the counts are high whether, trees are your trigger or grasses are your trigger or weeds are your trigger, that's quite key. It isn't always possible, depends on your background, but if you're allergic to grass, obviously when you're lying on grass, I say put a sheet down on the grass before you sit on it so it doesn't make you itchy. If you know that the neighbors or your city municipality is going to be cutting grass, and if you live near a field, try to be indoors on that day, or try to close your windows. Or, when you know that your neighbors are going to be working in the garden and something like that might be at a heightened level, then keep yourself indoors. Those are about most of the things that you really can do. And, one of the big examples I have for that is young kids or even professional athletes who are rugby players or are cricket players who are allergic to grass.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no way you can avoid spring allergies because grass might be your trigger, but this is obviously your passion and your sport and your work. So I think the key thing and my take-home message to Deline is that we've got now monitoring where you can check what you're allergic to and know when the counts are higher and lower, but really managing your symptoms and knowing how best to manage your quality of life is the crux of how you want to manage that.
Okay, great. And coming back to those sports people out there that love the grass but maybe have allergies, when they get back to their home and they shower or change clothes, could that make a difference, being exposed to the pollen on the clothes?
So I think yes and no. I think if there is a lot of grass pollen on your clothes, and if you're somebody who has skin as well, because with allergies, I like to look at your immune system as one organ. So often I say to patients all the time that when you're allergic to something, whether it's a peanut or whether it's your grass, it's your immune system that's reacting. So that's your eyes, your nose, your skin, and your chest. So if you're going to be putting on clothes that are, basically full of grass pollen or have got cut grass on it, if you've been, you're a rugby player and you've been rolling in the grass, and often, especially the young kids, moms say they come home and you can find the pieces of grass in their shorts and in their socks and stuff, that actually can aggravate you in terms of your eyes or your skin because it's direct contact with that protein onto your skin, which actually can elicit an immune response. But by and large, in terms of causing allergic rhinitis symptoms, because allergic rhinitis is generally a chronic illness, it's not sufficient to actually tell patients, you need to go and be so pedantic about washing and scrubbing and cleaning and things like that. And I hope that answers that question.
Okay, great. And we have another question that's come in from Lorato, and they ask, how do I find out exactly what I am allergic to?
Okay, so Lorato, this is an excellent question. How do you find out what you're allergic to? So we have lots of tests in the world. There's different types of ways that you can test for allergy. And I know we're talking about spring, but I'm going to speak to allergy tests in general here. We've firstly got something which we call a skin prick test. And essentially with a skin test, what we do is we would take a protein from the particular thing you're testing. You'd put it on your skin and you get a bit of a prick on your skin. And then we wait to see if your immune system is going to react to that. Now, this test is an excellent, what we call sensitivity test, meaning that it's a good test to check, is this person allergic to something or are they not allergic to this? Or are they sensitive or are they not sensitive? But in terms of giving you an idea of how bad is the allergy or quantifying the allergy, the skin prick test isn't the best test. You then want a marker, meaning that you want to know how high is this allergy on a scale of 1 to 10? And then we're looking at what we call blood tests. Now, you've got a whole range of blood tests, but usually the blood tests that allergologists use are something which we call specific IgAs. Your IgA is basically the cell in your body that's increased when you have allergies, and it's part of your immune system. It's one of the antibodies that gets risen in your bloodstream when you have allergies to a particular thing. And within your IgA, we would check, is the dust mite level specifically high or is the grass level specifically high? And why the blood test is a nice test, or sometimes, most often the better test to do, is because if you're a person struggling with allergies and you want to know what is the thing that causes my symptoms, often with a skin prick test, you might come up positive to 12 different things. But with a blood test, you're able to tell that, I've got 3 dogs at home, but my dog level might be 1 or 2, but my dust mite level might be sitting at 75 or 80. So I then know that, I am positive for dog and dust mite, but the thing that is probably causing my symptoms and really bugging up my quality of life is more likely the dust mite and not the dog.
Okay, great. We have another question that kind of follows along there. It's from Kathy, and they ask, when should someone consider getting tested?
Yes, again, excellent question, Kathy. And again, I'm going to break this down, even though we're talking about spring allergies, because it's all part of your immune system, is you want to be tested. And with testing, we've got either testing for food or you've got testing for the environment. And of course, the other part of testing is what we refer to as testing for drugs, which is a different category. But when we're looking at foods and when we're looking at the environment, if you've got a lot of the symptoms which we described in the talk, and often more people than not will see a talk like this and identify either with themselves having these symptoms or someone in their home snoring and snorting and sneezing all the time or getting aggravated. And in that case, if you feel that these symptoms are affecting me, I do have these symptoms, it might be a good idea to check. Is the dust mite affecting me? And I keep using dust mites and, your pollens as an example, because there are many things you can be allergic to. And we've got really sophisticated testing now where we can test an awful lot of things in the environment, but these are the things that we most commonly see, and these are the things that a lot of patients generally are allergic to. It might be of use to do a test because if you know you're allergic to dust mite, and if you've got an affinity to all these teddy bears and stuffed toys that you might have had from the time you were a kid, or if this was a kid who's sleeping with their, 7 teddy bears on their bed, actually just knowing that the dust mites from these stuffed toys are affecting them and removing them from your mattress, which is something you're exposed to all the time, can significantly impact your quality of life. And likewise with things like grass as well, right? So when you've got these symptoms, it's not just about, I want to know what I'm allergic to. It's, is this test going to impact my quality of life? Is this test something that's going to help me and help my doctor to manage me? And is this test actually going to make me feel better? And that's what we look at when it comes to the environment. And with foods, we want to do the tests with foods when we know that somebody's had an immediate IgE-mediated reaction to something. And what do we mean by that? Just in a nutshell, it means that you've eaten something, your immune system has immediately reacted. You're now worried that you might be allergic, and you want to now do a test because we want to know, are you truly allergic to this or are you not?
Great. Then we have a question that's just come in from Nanzima, and they ask, can I suddenly develop allergies as an adult?
These are amazing questions. I feel like these are all people who ought to be doing diplomas in allergy. So yes and no. So no, because, Kim, every day I see patients who come to me and, I've said this so many times on a public platform, and I know there are people who might not agree, but every day I have patients who'd say, I'm sure I'm allergic to dairy. I'm sure I'm allergic to milk. And my immediate response to these patients always is, if your immune system has been tolerating cow's milk protein for 10, 20, 30 years of your life, your immune system has antibodies. It is not and cannot suddenly become allergic to this. And often, since we're talking about spring allergies today, these are the symptoms patients attribute to things like dairy. They would say that, when I eat something specific, I feel more snotty. I feel a bit more runny in my nose. I feel a bit more phlegmy in my throat. But usually these are not symptoms of what we call an immediate immune-mediated reaction. So these, when we look at food allergies, is if you are allergic to something when you were younger, if you haven't outgrown it, then you're still going to have it. But if you haven't had that allergy, you can't suddenly become allergic. Now, the yes part of that question comes when it comes to food to seafoods, because seafood is the one allergy in terms of your foods that you eat that you can develop when you're an adult. And the way I like to explain this to my patients is that a peanut is a peanut is a peanut. An egg is an egg, it is an egg. But our seafood are creatures like us, and they evolve, and they've got eyes, and they're actually, an entire family of creatures that are evolving constantly in the sea. And that's why the proteins can go through changes, and the way human beings' immune systems can interact with this can actually change or alter, and you can have someone who might say, I ate fish all my life, but suddenly I ate in this restaurant and my throat started to feel closed. And then the last thing in terms of an allergy you can develop later on is to things like your preservatives and your chemicals. So, we're looking at things like your tartrazines and your MSG and your sulfates and your benzoates. But these are usually specific symptoms where patients would say there's a whole myriad of foods I eat, and I might feel that I feel a bit ill when I have 3 glasses of wine, but 1 glass might be okay. And now you're looking at a quantity-based thing with the preservative in it. But the last part of that is when it comes to your environmental allergies and our spring allergies with your grasses, your weeds, your trees, usually these are things that you would have from childhood.
Okay, and then a follow-up on that from me, not from anyone from Facebook,
Okay.
is could you be allergic to something and not really see the effects, but as you get older, you start seeing the effects? So it looks like you've got a new allergy?
Okay, and are we looking more at something we've etten or something in the environment?
Yeah.
That's
what makes it tricky.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's actually key. So like I said, with a lot of the time, the way you're describing it, I find with your additives and your chemicals and your preservatives, many patients would say, I've always drank wine, or I've always had champagne, or I've always had the noodles from the supermarket and I was fine. But recently I find that when I have those noodles or I have chili sauce or I eat from a salad bar, at the restaurant I've been eating my entire life, I do feel a bit off symptom, and the symptoms are usually quite a wide range. Some patients might feel a bit more drippy down their nostrils. Some patients might say, feel a bit itchy in my throat. I mean, in a severe case, you can actually even feel like your chest is a bit tight or inflammation there. So yes, those are things that you can tolerate and develop later on. These are your chemicals. But with your typical things, and that's now your cow's milk, your egg, your nuts, your soy, your wheat, and when we say nuts, we're referring to peanuts and tree nuts. By and large, if you've eaten it as a kid and you've maintained it in your body, in your immune system, not necessarily regularly, but you haven't cut it out and you continue to eat it, you shouldn't suddenly become allergic to it.
Okay. I actually see a question here that mentions one of the symptoms that you said. It's from a question from Charlene, and they ask, is constant nasal drip part of these allergies and dry eyes?
Yes, absolutely. It's Charlene, right?
Charlene,
Yes, 100% Charlene. So, often patients think that if I have allergic rhinitis, it must just be a runny nose. It actually doesn't have to be a runny nose. Some patients just have a blocked nose. Because often I would say to patients when I look at them, I know, you've got allergic rhinitis, and they say, no, I don't ever use any tissues because I know my brother grew up with his handkerchief in his hand throughout his life. So to me, that's what allergic rhinitis looks like. But actually, allergic rhinitis can be itchy, it can be runny, it can be blocked, it can be red, or you could just have dryness in your face as well. So often when you're looking at dryness in general, whether it's your eyes or whether it's your nose, is in terms of your nose, when your nostrils are so blocked, and we usually call that your nasal turbinates, and I look inside with a light, when they're so blocked, it means that the mucus can't come out. Often those patients would say the mucus goes down to their throat. So it's I'm going to try to do it. Oh, the click, yes. Oh. See, I found a patient. But that's the allergic click. So Kim is your perfect candidate there, right? But often you might find that the symptoms are down there and people don't realize because they're thinking allergic rhinitis is your nose, but this is actually going down here. And likewise with your eyes, just like your tongue, your lips, and your mouth, the inside of your eye. So if you pull down your eyes, the red bits that you can see is what we call a mucosal surface. And whenever you have an allergic response, it's your immune system that's reacting, but our mucosal surfaces are filled with cells that are ready to respond and react when they encounter an allergen. So that mucosal surface can either be drippy, and some people with what we call allergic conjunctivitis would be rubbing their eyes all the time. But if this is happening all the time, chronically, you're rubbing your eyes and you're rubbing your eyes and you're rubbing your eyes, you can then tend to err towards, instead of a wet, moist eye, which is dripping, have a completely dry eye. So it can be watery or it can be dry.
Wow. Okay. Non-Kulileko says, and I can relate to this, I have asthma, as do I. How can I manage both asthma and allergies during spring?
So non-Kulileko, this is the reason why, and I hope you're watching from the start. If you weren't, I used that first slide where in 1819, I don't know who that dude was, but he seemed to be very important in a medical chronicle journal. He described people having all these symptoms I talk about, itching, sneezing, running, blocked nose. And then he said at the bottom, to this was added a tightness of the chest and a difficulty in breathing, because that goes to exactly what you are describing. Most patients don't realize, and actually most healthcare workers, I can tell you, myself and my colleagues often don't realize that your airway is now what we call one airway. What that means is that your nose and your lungs actually is one long pipe connecting from the top to the bottom. Very similar to our gut. What we eat, we poo. When you breathe something in, it goes all the way down to the bottom of your lungs. So if you've got constant congestion inside your nostrils and constant blocking in your nose, and this is now one pipe. And another nice way I use to describe it to my patients is I say it's plumbing, right? It's a pipe. So if you're constantly itchy, runny, sneezy, that pipe then becomes slightly more inflamed, meaning it's not so open and it's not so clear. And then when you pick up the flu during flu season, or now it's spring and it's change of season and you're hit with that wind and you breathing in all of that gush of air full of pollen, that already slightly irritated airway is going to get a bit more congested, and often it can cause symptoms down in your chest as well. So many patients would start with saying, you know, when I climb upstairs, I feel like it's a bit of an effort. Even though I go to the gym and I work out quite a bit, I do feel that I get slightly out of breath. And, you know, the downside to this is, and I hope a lot of patients are listening to this and taking notes on this, is most patients would blame themselves. Most patients would tell themselves, it's just me, you know, I'm just lazy or I'm just unfit. I have people who are professional sports athletes, national sportsmen who obviously, because they're so fit, when I say to them, when they're allergic to grass, do you ever feel that it hinders your sport? And the answer is always no, because even they fall prey to the thinking that it's probably just me, you know, when I run and if I feel like I'm breathing a bit heavy, it's probably just me. But once you then assess them, identify their allergy, and now educate them that that grass that you're playing rugby on is potentially triggering your airways, and you manage that properly, more often than not, many of these people come back and say, you know what? All these years I thought I was the slowest guy on the team, and I actually realized that I'm fitter than I thought I was. And the other spectrum of that is the young kids at school and how much that can impact their performance in sport, and how much that can then impact their confidence when they're performing better in sport as well.
Great. A bit of a strange one here from Claire. I think a lot of people can relate to this. Is my problem is smells, particularly perfumes.
So Claire, what I would do, right, because I don't want to give you a blanket answer on the perfumes, is I would check to see if I have symptoms of allergic rhinitis first, and if I'm allergic to the general stuff in the environment, because often what happens is that patients have the allergic symptoms that they react to, and those are the common ones. And because you've got a slightly inflamed nose, your nose is more sensitive and it's more reactive. And in that situation, the paint and the perfumes and the creams and all of the other things, you know, even the builder next door who might be renovating or fumigating their house, those things might irritate you, because generally, if you've got a clear nostril, you're less likely to be irritated by things in the environment. But if you've got a nostril that's red and angry, I call it angry. It's angry because it's ready to just spit water all the time, right? And it's ready to itch all the time. If you've got a nose that's like that, you're more likely with that perfume and those things to irritate you. Yes, you can be allergic to the chemicals and the perfumes. And those are things that we can assess in a patient for sure, but those are not as common as having a general baseline sensitive nose that reacts or overreacts to things.
Okay, and I think we have time for one more question. If we haven't reached your question yet, please feel free to still add your questions to our Facebook page. We will get back to you. Hopefully we have answered it already if there's any overlap. But we have a question from Rosette, and they say, why do my allergies make it hard to sleep, and what can I do?
Oh, these are amazing questions. So Rosette, again, with allergies, for myself as an allergist, one of the things I'm most passionate about is the quality of life effects of allergies. Because people, again, and I think that part I mentioned, just look at it as a blocked nose. But, we mentioned the sport and we mentioned the concentration already. But the sleep is hugely affected because, the clicking that you did just now, Kim, if you're potentially allergic to the dust mite or your cats, and your cats are sleeping on your mattress with you, or your dogs who sleep near your bed, all night while you're sleeping, you're going to be inhaling these things that you're potentially allergic to. And if your allergies aren't managed properly, you actually are going to tend to be breathing with a more labored approach rather than having a calm type of breathing. And research has proven that people who sleep with a blocked nose tend to have a poorer REM sleep versus people who have a clear open nose when they're breathing, because our sleep is there to give us rest. It's there to give us energy. In children, it's also key to help them, give them energy to grow as well. So, the effects of not having a good enough sleep, not just your sleep alone, have a ripple effect on so many other things. And with the sleep, there's so many things that could affect you. It could be waking up to do this all the time. It could be waking up because your one nostril is blocked, so you can't breathe, and then you need to turn to the other side. It could be waking up to cough because you've got this constant irritating dry cough. It could be because, you keep blowing your nose and you need more tissues. Or it could be because your nose is so blocked, you're breathing with your mouth, and now your mouth is so dry and your lips are so dry, so you need to wake up to drink water all the time. So yes, 100% yes. In fact, I would say 200% yes. Allergic rhinitis, not managed properly, has been proven to, and I see that every day, really impact sleep in patients.
That sounds awful. I don't know. I don't know about you, but I love sleep. So, what's next? What can someone do if we've spoken about these symptoms? You identify some in yourself. What's the next steps?
So, I think identifying the symptoms and knowing what triggers you is pretty important, because when we know that we're allergic to pollen, for example, then it's the 5th of September today. We know this is our season. This is when we're going to be triggered because our pollen counts are not really high right now, but it's going to rise more and more and more. And generally we find end of August, September, it's our tree pollens and our weed pollens. But as we go from spring towards summer, our grass pollens start taking over, and you have your grass pollens that are in the air for a longer period of time. So when you know, as a patient who's struggling, that this is the season I'm going to be worse, then chatting to your doctor or seeing an allergist at least once, because okay, well, do I need medication every day, or should I secure my medication for seasons where I'm worse, like the pollen season? And if so, what is that medication? Not over-the-counter stuff that might just give me side effects and might just put a Band-Aid over the problem for a short period of time. Proper allergy medication so that you know that you're treating the allergic response rather than just constantly giving yourself decongestants. I don't know if this is, well, I have used these statistics in talks before, but I mean, the pharmacy, the over-the-counter pharmaceutical industry, and if there's any pharmacists watching me now, I'm sure they're not going to like this, but it is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the USA. And these are over-the-counter meds. And, we look at statistics of things that people are spending their money on, and you'll be shocked, Kim, with how many people are spending money on, my nose is blocked, I need something quickly, without needing to see a doctor because people are desperate. Or, I need a shot because my allergies are so bad and this shot is going to help you for a short period of time, but you're not actually treating the root of it. So I think really there isn't a one size fits all. It's knowing what your triggers are so you know when you're better and when you're worse, seeing the right doctor so you know that you're treating the allergy rather than just treating the superficial symptoms, which might then become worse the next year, because that's what you run the risk of. If you keep taking a cortisone shot at your GP every year, you might feel amazing. I mean, I do it myself sometimes to myself, but you're not actually helping your symptoms long term, and you're making your allergies worse. Because if you've got a compromised airway, and again, let's talk about the plumbing. If that pipe is half blocked and you're just taking a cortisone shot, next year in spring, it's going to get more blocked. And in 2027, it's going to be more blocked. And then in 2030, you're going to have a problem where you might not be able to breathe in that season. And somebody is going to say that you need to be nebulized, you need oxygen, and you need an inhaler. And this is why it's so key to get the correct testing, not random testing, relevant testing, and correct management that's tailored for you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thulja. And thank you to all our viewers and for these amazing questions you've sent through. If anything has resonated with you or you see yourself in any of these cases, please reach out to a healthcare provider to manage those symptoms. And like Dr. Thulja said, we want a target test. Take your symptoms to your healthcare provider so we can get the correct test done. Have a great evening, and